Welcome. This is All Things Equal, and I'm Holly Burrow. This podcast is dedicated to the ESOs who make entrepreneurship support possible. On my journey of building EQALL, which we've fondly begun calling the BSO for ESOs, I've had the honor of hosting conversations with amazing humans doing impactful work across the globe. Somewhere on that journey, I realized that everyone that does this work needs to hear the wild, wonderful, and intricate stories that I was hearing. That's why we're here. I want to shine a light on the people building the info programs and support systems that help founders thrive. We'll dig into what's working, what's not, and the lessons learned from the front lines of entrepreneurial support. If you're an ESO, this show is for you because your work powers the future of entrepreneurship, and we are so here for it. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you, Holly. Well, thanks for having me on. Uh, I always say how I spend the majority of my time is I'm the CEO of Amplify Louisville. I can talk more about that in a minute. But a lot of times I like to say I'm inspired to help startups and entrepreneurs and change makers be successful because I think that just like you, we do so many different things that the thing that pays me the most money isn't the only thing that I do. Sorry, board members, if you're watching this. But yeah, no, so Amplify, we're the state-funded entrepreneurial support organization in Kentucky. And we help primarily tech-enabled, venture-backable startups, anywhere from ideation to kind of a first growth stage round. I don't put names on it because it's different depending on where you are. Um, and we do that in a variety of different ways, which I'm sure we'll dig into. That's who we focus on. That's our kind of niche as a part of our grant from the state. And so we're trying to help build an innovation economy here in Louisville.
Well, and I feel like one of the first conversations that we got to have was about what that journey has looked like doing that at a statewide level. And so tell me a little bit what that has felt like, because that's a big journey.
Sure. I mean, the way that the state focuses on this is that there are six independent entities that actually have this grant from the state with this general mandate to focus on tech companies. But of course, I think where you and I talked about our very first grant was very centrally located on the urban part of the Louisville area.
Hmm.
And 2 years ago, we got our extended grant, new grant, yay, it expanded our area tremendously. So now we cover about 27% of the state's population, but that combines both the urban part of Louisville, but then very rural parts of our state as well. And as we look at our peers across the state, it's kind of everyone has different issues, right? If you think about our more urban core of the three kind of major cities for our state, we have very different issues than our extremely rural part of the state deals with, which I think you and I talked about. And it's really hard to get programming that's consistent for the whole state because there's no such thing as one size fits all for entrepreneurship. And even at a very macro level, just thinking about geography wise, just urban versus rural, that's even more difficult. So for Amplify with this now expanded area that includes both, it's been a real interesting challenge to think about programming and efforts when you're really serving two different types of population. The framework ends up being the same, but the way that we introduce that framework into the different communities looks different.
What are the biggest differences you've seen in how those frameworks need to be presented? Because we work in
Mhm.
both spaces as well, so I'm
Yeah.
really curious what the differences are that you've tugged out.
I think in the more urban areas, you just have more density, you have more resources, have more, again, focus on tech companies. You have just more people that are doing that because we're closer to larger universities, right? We have larger companies in these areas. You get into more of the rural area, they don't have there's not as much density in resources, but also just even examples, right? Like a lot of tech founders that we have in the city, they can go to the coffee shop or restaurant or bar and see other tech founders. When you're in another part of our community, that is impossible. You walk in there and it's a bunch of other entrepreneurs, depending on how you define that, people with mom and pop shops, all these different pieces, but not on the tech side, which is just different enough to be, one of those things. Well, like, I guess we can't do it here, right? I hear that a
Yeah.
lot. So the big difference is just that density piece between the two, the resources that exist, but then just this kind of like aspirational folks around you. And more the rural communities, they just don't have that. And so part of the work that we've done is like, well, it's a challenge too, by the way, because rural communities don't like when the city folk come on in and tell them how to do things,
Yep.
right? So we've been trying to figure out ways to find those individuals that have been successful in those communities and really just do a lot of storytelling, right? Come
I was
back
gonna
in
say
and say,
for us it's always storytelling.
yeah,
It's getting like because even me personally, like I come from a really rural community originally. And so even if I'm the one giving the talk, I start with talking about being from a tiny town and what that looked like and felt like to be an entrepreneur and to be the only one in the room that thought that way. So like I think a lot of it is the storytelling and getting that connection happening that is not always easy to find.
well, it's funny that you do that. So I do the same thing. I show a picture of me from high school because I went to high school. I grew up in a rural part of the state. Though I've lived in the city the majority of my life, like I can still at least say, hey, look, this is where I'm from, county adjacent to you. And just to try to give me some credibility early on. But it's even just the way you dress, the way you talk. Like, for example, our organization is Amplify Louisville because that's where but we dropped the Louisville from our branding and everything just so because we didn't want to come in with any preconceived notions that, hey, we're here to fix things. We know how to do this. Part of the framework is really just more like we're here to come along. We're here to supercharge some of the things that already exist,
Yeah.
identify the gaps, and how can we fill the gaps? We can fill some of them, but really it's going to take, the proverbial it takes a village, right? To fill all those. And that's credibility building and trust building, which takes time. We just got into these areas again in the last 2 years, and we're just now starting to get proactive calls of folks asking us to help come and partner with them, which I'm like, okay, it's
Ooh,
working.
that's the turning
It's
of the tide.
working.
I love
Yep.
that.
Yep. I'm like, like someone's just yesterday, someone called me, like, want to meet on Thursday, and it's 2 hours away. And I'm like, yes,
I do.
yeah, I cleared my calendar. I'm like, this is the meeting. I don't know what the meeting's going to be about, but it's the point that they asked, and I'm going to show up. That I think is the important piece because that's what people want, right? Just want to know that you're going to show up and that you're going to do what you say.
No, I agree. I'm a big believer for us that when we're learning about a new client, a new city, a new community, we need boots on the ground. We need to be in the place. We need to learn the geography. We need to understand the community and the culture and all
Yeah,
the things. And I feel like for us, and obviously for you guys as well, it's something that kind of sets us apart in how we think about it. Because I think a lot of solutions are we've built a solution, we will give it to you to use.
yep,
And I think we very much view that as we want to come in and see if our solution fits, and if it
right.
doesn't, we can shift it and tweak it and change it and get it to where you need it to be. And I think that's a big difference in the way a lot of solutions are looked at. Even organizations we talk to that have built their own programming and things, and they're looking at rolling it out either into a new location or to a new specific audience, they don't always wanna look at, well, is this actually the right fit? Does this actually fit? We had someone recently, they had built something for small business owners and were wanting to start addressing technology building within their community. And they said, "Oh, well, we'll just put a new title on it." And I was like, I mean,
And
but that's maybe not ideal because, like you said, it's just enough different that it's different."
yeah, nothing but well, I always say you can drive your feet, doesn't make it right. It's one of those things like, and they can sniff that out really quickly too, right? They're like, oh wait, this is lipstick on a different pig. Like, let's
Mhm.
actually, and that, so to your point, and kind of the same philosophy. So I say the framework's the same, the core principle of like founder at the center, all these pieces are the same. It's just what we learned is when we came in and we think about we think about ecosystem mapping, we think about finding the resources and then just identifying what's there and then taking our analysis of what we done and said, hey, this is what we see. Who agrees with this or disagrees? And then once we're all on the same, like once we all agree where we are, now it's like, how do we
Mm,
fix it? Here's what
yeah.
we can do. This is what we're mandated to do. This is what we have funding to do. Here's what we can't do. But if you can find us funding, we can do it. And by the way, maybe this is what SPDC needs to do, right? Maybe
Yes.
this is what we bring in Holly to do. Maybe this is what we
Yeah.
go bring in these other experts to do. Like
Yeah.
instead of, because I think other organizations like ours, they get bloated, right? They want to do all the programs, do all the things. So they hire people and then they're constantly fundraising for all these pieces. I'm like, this is where I think if you just, we say this in the community, like 'cause people have gotten frustrated with us for not being much larger than we are. I'm like, look, we're a node in the network. If there's another node in the network that can do the work, like let's bring them in.
Which that's a
Like, I don't know,
better
that seems
ecosystem building. That creates a stronger ecosystem. That to me feels right. Like that's because that's very much how we look at it as well. Is like if we're coming in a community and we're working kind of as navigators to help
yeah,
business owners figure out where do I go, how do I function, what do I need next. We need to know all of the nodes in the network so that we
mhm.
can say, "Hey Joe, I'm going to introduce you to Sam because Sam has what you need." We don't need to be everything. We just need to know where all the things are. Like that's
Well, that goes back to what we say our primary thing is we're air traffic controllers, right?
yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
don't need to fly the plane. I don't need to own all the airports, but I should be able to get you to the next one safely without crashing into each other, right? Or big
Yeah,
things
yeah.
that you want to avoid. And, just thinking about as you were saying that, I'm thinking about that conference you and I were recently at. And we drew pictures of our ecosystem.
Yeah.
And just
Me with my
seeing your
black hole.
no, no, it's so amazing. And, and I'm thinking, when it's funny, you think about that. I drew a network, but not all the nodes are connected, right?
Hmm.
And I can say like I think we've done a decent job of being connected to all the nodes, but not all the nodes feel that it's reciprocal, right? They don't want to be connected. They want to be separate. And I think that's what ecosystem, you're going to find that not every ecosystem. I don't believe there is harmony and like pure harmony in any ecosystem. You have egos, you have all the complex things that we know. But I think at the core of it, I'd rather just lead by example and do a bunch of nudges and say like, look, it's never going to be 100%. Like, let's give this money to somebody else. I think that's the thing that freaks people out. Like, you're going to let them take the money and not you. I'm like, well, yeah, they'll use the money more
Yeah.
efficiently because this is what they do. Like, I'd have to spend money learning or hiring people. Like, that doesn't make any. That's a waste of
It's not a
the
great use
funder's
of
time.
funds.
No, again, and we're not the experts in everything, and we don't want to be.
One of the easiest ways when I first started doing this of getting people to understand what we did is I would approach it from, well, what would it cost you to hire someone to build and run a program? And they would
Hmm.
rattle off some all-in number that, that it's salary plus benefit, blah, 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 all the things. And I would be like, well, we can do it for $40,000. And they would be like, so it sometimes it makes sense depending on what you're doing to just utilize the other resources that are out there. And I feel like as far as ecosystem building goes, there's always going to be the human element of, well, why did you give the money to them? They're not doing as good a job as us. I think that as that field continues to grow and we get better at understanding how to track metrics, for
Hmm.
ecosystem building, which is a really elemental thing that like I've had lots of conversations with Faye and Andy with eShip and like trying to
Yeah.
figure out how do we use some of our data collection to superpower that and fuel that because we have interesting points of collection. And I feel like it's really hard to figure out what are we supposed to be collecting in order to show collaboration, to show connection, because ecosystem is hard. It's so human.
Yeah. And I mean, well, first I want to go back and like also talk about the point you made about like your services. So yeah, that group could come in and hire that person, which would be more, but then do they have the curriculum that's tried and true that works? Like sometimes they have to develop that too, which is another, like, I think this is where most people don't think about it. They're like, I mean, what you have built, someone can't just pull it off the shelf or do it tomorrow. And I think that's the important things. Like, not only is it more affordable, it's quite frankly better and probably scalable compared to hiring someone and crossing your fingers that it takes off the way that you want it to. So, anyways, that part of it. And then, yeah, going back to the ecosystem reporting, it's funny, just last week or the before, we had one of our major city organizations reach out to me and a couple other ESOs or other folks that focus on startups and say, where are the city's talking points on entrepreneurship? And, I was the first to go, we do not have a unified set of talking points. Say, here is what Amplify uses. And it includes data and information about other folks. But a lot of times in that collaboration moment, the scarcity mindset really takes over. I remember early
And
on,
it's
and
wild.
you and I talked about this. You and I talked about this. Like when I first took over, when I first got into this role, I was trying to do something with various ESOs, and I wanted to send out an email. So I said, "Hey, everybody, send me your list, your contact list, so I can send out this unified email for all of us." And none of them. And I found I was like, "What?" And I was paying for like I was like, "I don't understand." And then it was because in the day they're like, "Well, if you reach out, you're now gonna have access to my clients and then potentially my funders."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Okay, and?" And so I still just I went, "And?" I remember this, and the look on the woman's face was like, "Well, then we wouldn't have them." Like, you just assume I'm gonna take them, or you assume like something bad's gonna happen.
We
Like
always
I'm
assume worst intent with that
right.
stuff, honestly. Like that's because we get similar questions because they think that we're going to steal the business owners.
Mhm.
I don't know what we would do with them. I don't put them in my pocket. I'm not really sure.
Right,
But
right.
like I was like, we don't serve them directly. Like we don't have a direct to consumer model. We
Yeah, for
wouldn't
you, I'll
even
say.
have a way to build them, or we just quite simply don't work that way. And then a lot of times we need to be in the room with a funder because the funder is deeply curious about what we do. And if they're going to be paying for it, they want to understand how it works and where the data is going and all the things. But they get nervous about that as well. So just like you, they were like, well, then you might take our funder. I'm like, and do what with them? We're a for-profit company. Like, I'm not going to take your
Yeah.
funder.
Yeah. I mean, for you all, it makes like I'm really surprised you get that pushback because
We get it a
your model
lot.
seems pretty straightforward that way. I mean, I just eventually for me, I was just like, I hear you and understand. I don't have a defense to that, and then like that doesn't make any sense to me. And it broke down collaboration because we all sent out separate emails to the group. I mean, and so I think this is where going back to some of the stuff you mentioned around Fay and around eShip and this whole concept around ecosystem building and more of this like, man, we can all survive together here. We can all do this together. Matter of fact, we can even federate or we can actually join forces. If we really say we care about founders and economic development and moving the city forward, then I don't know how anyone can argue with being more synergistic or just playing together, like having vectors aligned. And so half of my stump speeches in the city are about let's do this together. And that, by the way, Amplify, because they think we have state money, they think we have like a Fort Knox since it's in our state, I guess. They think we have access to it. And I'm like, no, no, no. No, we don't. Can't literally can't afford to do all of it. And we don't want to. So let's do it together.
Well, and I feel like the one of the things that we've been able to see because we get to have like this giant purview of all the geographies is
Hmm.
we do get to see communities where the organizations are working together well. And the reality is that they can go after bigger buckets of money together.
Yes.
And it's really, really interesting to have those conversations with smaller scale ESOs that are still in that scarcity mindset, usually because they're younger in tenure and they haven't existed very long. And so they've never had the opportunity to test the waters there. They're so scared of being able to collaborate because they're afraid to lose what they have that they're missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
They
Well,
could
I think
actually
it's
get
interesting.
more money to do the work.
I think it's interesting you said new folks. So my experience is the ones that have been doing it for decades, right? And
Mm,
it's lived in Metro and it's lived in a
sure. Okay.
chamber, and it's lived in all these other places
Yeah.
where they were always fighting for their bucket of dollars. Now, new folks, I think is just I don't disagree with you. I think it's just a lack of knowledge or lack of experience. But I think there's this, and I see it happening now for our community, which is just overturning leadership in some of these really key stakeholders in the community. And then those new folks coming in with much more of a collaborative mindset. I don't know if it's me. Again, I'm not doing the data analysis to say if it's generational or what it is. And I know Gen X is the best generation and we're taking over everything right now. But other than that, no. But we do. I mean, it's kind of like I'm a sales guy at heart, right? I'm always like, no is not right now. No isn't no forever. It's just not right now.
Just not right
And
now. Well,
so sometimes it takes leadership changes for that too.
and I feel like I have a unique perspective because I didn't start my world in this work. I came into this work like 2019, and when I first started in this space, I came in like I was a wild collaborator. Like I was like, why are we not all doing this together? We're stronger together. And I was
Yeah.
so deeply like to my core confused. Like, and it was just like the one and one, they don't, this doesn't make sense
Right.
because I couldn't get organizations to come together. Like, I literally couldn't get them to come to the table together. I couldn't get them to, like, we would go to them and say, well, we have this one founder and they have been through 7 programs within the city. We know because we are on the back end of 7 programs, and we need you all to know that this is happening because we need to be a bit more intentional about how they're being served. Like, can we be pushing them in an intentional way from start to medium to finish
Yeah.
instead of them just touching every program because they're available? And we couldn't get the organizations to the table. We've gotten better at that over time, but it's such a hard journey to get them to want to sit down together. And I don't know how to solve it.
Money. I mean, here's what I've seen is that the time that we had the most collaboration was when we had part of our grant was that we could sponsor a lot of things. And going back to my core thesis, like I don't want to build something that already exists. So we gave about 40% of our budget was supercharging other ESOs. And it's amazing what happens when you have money to give. Now, I say that skeptically because we saw that change as our grant changed about that ability. But this is where I've said to larger organizations in our community of like, you actually can bring us together because a lot of people, everybody needs money to do the things. It's hard to like just add new things with nothing. And so how do you get that as a part of collaboration? And then I think it has to be built from there. It's so much you have to have like the bait to get them into the boat. And then once they're in the boat, you just got to level and be like, you're not going to be, a fish sandwich. We're going to be a new school of fish. I don't know. That's a terrible analogy. I just thought of it. Please cut this part out. No, but how do we like, I just feel like it's almost like you have to get people there has to be something to get them to the table, to your point, that is not going to, this altruism hasn't been it, at least for us, and I think several communities that we both can attest to. So whatever, and then once they're there, what are we going to do with it? And that's what I mean, it's either we have new to community, getting folks together, there has to be the initial linchpin, and then what's the opportunity that we have to take advantage of then?
No, I agree. I agree. And there are more and more communities starting to understand this, but it's an interesting. So you mentioned a second ago you don't like to build things that have already been built. So what's something that you've built in this particular tenure that you feel like you're super proud of? Like, we did a thing and it was really novel and I loved it.
It was novel at the time.
Sure.
This is no, and say like that. Well, this is the best form of flattery is like people copying things, right? So we were the first of our, we call it hubs, venture hubs, to start an entrepreneur residence program.
Mm.
Or, every entrepreneur residence has different definitions too. I like to say startup Sherpas, but
I like that.
essentially how do we take near peers, recent, either exited founders or current founders and have them actually be the coaches and the supporters for entrepreneurs? And so that's something that we built back in 2021, I think is when we first started it. And it's probably our highest ROI on our dollars because, A, it just expands our capacity.
Yeah.
There's, though I've started multiple companies, I did it so long ago, most new founders don't know that. So I don't have that credibility any longer, which identify, I get it, right? So let's find the people that they trust. Sometimes it needs to look like someone that has a lived experience that they have, looks like them, talks like them, whatever that is. And we try to be very thoughtful about those components. So that's what I think one of the original things that we built early on that now, and I think it's great. Now every other group in our state has
I
some
love
version
that
of
though.
this. Right. But I think, we just showed like all the testimonials, all the data. We were able to get funding around it because we could prove the value immediately. Because as you know, a lot of the work that we do at the core is 20-year models.
Yes.
Right. And so that's, hey, what's this going to, I'm like, the ROI, you're not going to see this for a while, if ever. Like,
I
quite
might be
frankly,
long gone by then. Yeah.
right. But here's something that like you're going to, and outside of like, we're going to put your logo on something. But here, if you really want to move the needle in a community, this is a initiative and a program that we have that gets direct results and you see it in pretty short turnaround times.
I
So that,
love that. And that totally sparked something in my head for a way that I was not looking at what we do. That I'm actually wondering if there's some applicability there for more rural communities where an EIR is not necessarily something that is reasonable to expect, but kind of our model is that we only hire coaches that have walked the walk. And so I'm wondering if there's conversation to be had there with some of the communities that we're serving. Like, is this a model that might work for them? Because you're not wrong, like that it's important to have it from that perspective and be like, this is somebody that's recently done this, that I feel
Hmm.
like I can trust, I can look in the eye and feel safe with. I know they have a
Hmm.
shared experience, and I like that a lot. I think it's really cool that y'all were the first ones to do it in the state, and now there's many.
Well, and to go to your point, so when I mentioned the expansion, so that's one of the first, and the urban rural divide. I mean, that's one of the first folks that we hired was an EIR
I love
for
that.
some of this rural area because, again, same reason we have already talked about, and it's been tremendously valuable. Now, the challenge is that EIR does different things because there's not the density of entrepreneurs or resources. So that EIR actually builds relationships and brings the resources from around the state, specifically our area, to the founders that they do get to work with. And
That's
so without having to
cool.
go like, here's the people from the city coming in, it's like, no, I've been using this resource from Louisville or Lexington or wherever, and you should try them out. And it just feels different, right? When it's a neighbor telling you this versus someone that lives 2 hours away.
No, I deeply agree with that. I love that so much. And I think that you are probably the most unique person that I've had the opportunity to sit down and talk with, in that you understand the rural and the urban in the same scope. Because most of the organizations that we get to sit down and talk with, they're very focused on one or the other.
Yeah.
And the interplay between them is complex. Like,
Hmm.
and you
Yeah.
have to figure out what matters to each space and how to fuel them with each other. Like that's
Well, and I think and I would think the state it always is looking at how they're doing this. We're blessed to have their investment, but I would be curious if they'll keep the structure up where there is urban and rural together. I think we've done a
Mhm.
really good job with it, but it is like it's almost we got very little additional funding to do this, but it is almost like a separate organization. We have separate news channels, we have separate social accounts, we have everything has to be tailored to the different areas, um, because you meet founders at their needs, right?
You have to. And if you don't, you ultimately don't reach them.
That's right. That's right. Yes, yes. But I think the other part that's interesting about that, not to derail the conversation, but you and I may have talked about this last time we got together. But I think I've learned so much more about how our state can be successful by being in the rural areas, which takes up 90% of our state, right? And I think it's, like for example, this entrepreneurship through acquisition is such a big topic right now.
Yes.
And there are a lot of amazing operators and workers across our state. And instead of trying to go into these communities and find Facebook, I'm like, we should take this entrepreneurial human and who's probably a good operator and help them buy a business. I mean,
Yes.
preferably from a state surrounding us because we don't want to like cannibalize ourselves. But like, that's the way we could unlock a lot of entrepreneurs. And if you take that long view, right, you take the 20-year view, if mom or dad is the entrepreneur working in the business they bought, well, that's going to show me it's possible. And then I think that flywheel effect starts happening versus, yeah, dad tried to start Facebook and couldn't, and I'll never be an entrepreneur because forget that. It was terrible. Like I just think I just think there's a smarter with the rural areas because they require different support, I think, and there's so much more, but I think there's something about that just makes sense to me. I haven't fully, as you can tell, like fleshed out how I can communicate this, but there's something about this, like there's something here.
There's something there. I agree as well, because I'm deeply interested in figuring out funding models for employee owned as organizations are shifting hands. So instead of an organization shutting down because Pop got older and had to retire, if it's not someone in the family, because as we all know, that doesn't always happen, it's not always son or grandson that wants to take over. Is there a methodology to create a funding model where we can help fund that transition to someone that
Hmm.
worked in that business and keep it within the location, because that location based problem isn't going to go away. So if Pop
That's
Pop's
correct.
been solving this problem for 50 years, we don't want the solution to disappear.
That's right.
But a lot of times there's not funding available for that. It's an odd model that doesn't fit with a lot of the traditional funding methodologies. So we've been
Right.
trying to figure out, which I think you'll be excited as we like share more about what we're doing with that. But like that's something
Great.
we've been trying to figure out, how can we figure out funding models to help with employee owned in some of these more rural spaces and some
Hmm.
spaces that they need those location based businesses to stay,
Yeah.
because it's
Agreed.
that when they leave it hurts the community.
Right. Thought I realize, and we always think about Hertz community too, in the sense of jobs and taxes. But I've like started to come to the mindset like it's the person that donates to the Cub Scouts or owns tickets to the local basketball team or whatever. It's
Sponsors
these
the
soft,
T-ball team. Yeah.
right. Like you end up losing. Like, well, oh, we lost those employees. Or we're gonna find it. Like, yes, but then we also, because a lot of times those people, they leave a lot of value on the table because they haven't been running that company as sophisticatedly as they could. And then sometimes they get, if it's enough money, they move. They
So
become snowbirds or whatever.
yes.
And so I think to your point, that location, I mean, this is such a great way of saying that. The location piece of it is the critical part. And we'll have to talk offline too, because I actually have been looking at this as like a workforce like recruitment model, because I think in a lot of these communities you have a generation whose kids left because they didn't want to be in the small town. They have these skills like how do we do matchmaker.com between things to buy and people's kids that they want
We're
here.
very much on the same
Oh,
page. We definitely
see, these people are friends. This is why this
we
works.
definitely need to talk more about that.
Yeah, love it.
Because we're very much on the same page, and it's really interesting. So I have the unique vantage point of having a life partner that is international, and so I've had the opportunity over the last few years while building this to, whenever we go on vacation or traveling or visiting friends in other countries, I always go to see local startup things and things that are
Yeah,
happening in other communities, because I feel like that's the best way for me to continue to feel inspired, is to look
right.
outside what we know. So some of the cool things that we've seen that I think you'll find really interesting is there's more and more things popping up where there's housing for early stage entrepreneurs.
Mm,
So it's baked into a model where it's like a subsidized apartment for a year, but it's on
okay.
site and it's like a
Hmm.
startup environment where they wake up I mean, because that's what startup founders don't do anything else. Let's be real. So if you put them in a really simple, basic apartment where they're safe and funded and cared for and fed, and then that's the big investment, because that's a lot of times at that stage, that's what they need money for, is to be able to just work 18 hours a day on
Yeah,
building their tool or whatever they're doing. And that's the thing that I've been the most like interested and excited about from that vantage point, is like
yeah,
seeing communities do that and create like a safe space for founders to be founders is, I think, really interesting.
yeah. I mean, it's takes that co-working to cohabitation model, right? Assuming depending on how they have it, if in my head, I think of like a dormitory where there's
It
like
kind
a
of
co-
is, yeah.
a common living space where guess what? I mean, the first thing we talk about this and we talk about a lot. Mentors and other founders are some of the best resources for founders because they're going through it. They know like, oh man, don't use that attorney, or yeah, this was a really great developer that I hired, and then to have a space where they're, not only doing that while they're working, but while they're lunching or watching sports or whatever it might be. That's a really interesting model. I wonder how they get that funded, but it's cool.
That's a lot of them are state-based funding. So it's something that they
Okay.
went to the either the government locally or the government at the highest level and said that we think
Yeah.
that there's a use case for this, and prove the use case. And it's really interesting because, to your point, like founders only want to talk about what they're building. Like they don't even really want to talk about anything else. I mean, I'm sure that my family is really disgusted with hearing me talk about Equal, because for 5 years that's all I wanted to talk about. We're
Yeah.
sort of coming out of that haze at the moment, but that's all founders really want to do. So I think giving them that type of environment where they have other people that they can be that intensely hyper focused with, and they're sharing that same part of the journey. I think there's a lot of value in that. I don't know.
Man, like, yeah, I can see, like, you even have, because the other part of that where founders are not very good at themselves, like from a wellness standpoint. So, but I see a bunch
Yeah.
of really smart things of that. That's cool. Yeah, I
I
loved
thought
it.
it
I
was
loved it.
clever.
Yeah. Anybody from my state, if you want to fund that, I'll be happy to figure it out.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Or we can hire Holly, who's figured it out, and bring her here and have her do it.
I just think it's such a cool model, and I think it
That is.
helps with a really strange aspect of being a founder that's hard.
Hmm. Yeah.
And what you like, you end up with things like Founder House and all of these crazy things that are
Yeah.
funded by like venture backed
Right.
funding, and it's they what comes out of those is usually not very healthy. Because it's basically like, yes, they're founders all living together for a year or whatever that might look like, but it's, kind of a lot of
For what?
partying and it's not
Right.
healthy.
It sounds like it's the one of those TV shows. It's like
It's
Big
like real
Brother or
world,
whatever. Real
it's like
World. Yeah,
real
there you
world
go.
from the 90s. I mean, it's
That's right. It sounds like that with a bunch of like high strung, anxious, overachieving people.
hyper
And they
intense.
hyper. Yeah, I hope they were recording that. That'd be a great thing to watch. I mean, I see it play out in small groups here. It's like, oh, the one co-working space that only has like 10 people, but those 10 people are, it's basically like a keg party with good internet. It's like, okay,
Yes,
hey,
yes.
it takes all kinds.
It takes all kinds. And I think the coolest thing about being a founder oftentimes is when you find your tribe of humans.
Hmm.
Like that to me, whenever that happens, and it's always a magical moment because we
Yeah,
get to watch it a lot of times. Like we'll watch
yeah,
founders like unearth each other, and then we'll watch them. They just kind of wander off together as a group, like, and they're
right.
like, I found my people. This is amazing."
Yeah, I love that you said that. That's right. It's so great when you've been mentoring someone for so long and they find that group and you just see so much change in the way they think about things because, like, I'm not weird. I'm not alone, right? I am. There are other people like me, and it's great. I mean, we all need that, right? This is
We
why
all
I
need
think
that.
when we go to our own big tribe events, if you will, and we're around a bunch of people, we don't have to explain what we do, just pieces of it. It feels like home. It's great.
No, it's really agree with that. It's really exciting, which was one of my reasons for wanting to do this particular podcast was I get to have cool conversations with
Yeah.
people that do what we do, and there's really not that many of us, honestly. So, what if instead of us all having these conversations separately, I could help be the catalyst to share what
Yeah.
Larry's learning, what I'm learning, and put it out into the world so that more people can be part of that conversation? Because we all feel super alone at times because a lot of people don't understand what we do.
Yeah. Well, just like you've said this about like Equal is your startup. Amplify is, I mean, I started it. It's my startup. I've worked as hard as I have in any other startup I've ever been in. It's just got a different tax code. Right.
Sure.
And so to your point, it's the same thing we try to help it's like, how do you help the helper? Right. How do it's like, how do you train the trainer? How do you help the helper?
How do you help the
Um,
helper?
yeah, that. And so, I love it. I'm glad that you're doing it. I think, actually you should consider I'm thinking about this, like some of the conferences that we're at that have sessions. You should just do like a fireside chat like this as a session.
I would love to. I've been thinking, how can I use what I'm learning from doing this process and how I'm figuring out how to structure the conversations
Yeah.
in a way that could be done on stage.
Yeah.
I agree. I've been kind of playing with what might that look like and where would that be best suited.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I don't know if people are going to be interested in listening to what I have to say, but I know when I listen to other ecosystem builders, I'm like, hey, it's just nice to hear the common things that we talked about. But I think if you do it on a bigger stage, again, I think even at these conferences, people that are new are still trying to figure out who they are. Like one of the groups, without naming them, I did like a little small forum group with 8 members.
Hmm.
And it was amazing how much not scarcity, I'm sorry, how much imposter mindset there is,
Mm.
right? And how they feel. I mean, all the things we just said. And it's like, oh, hey, here's Holly's point of view, or here's Larry's point of view, or here's what we went through. It might look like we have it together. And so,
We're building it while we're
yeah,
flying.
that's right. And so I think that's actually I would support you in any of these things of getting on stage. It'd be fun to have you do a couple different folks, not a panel, but fireside chats a couple times with people in different stages of ecosystem building. I don't know.
I
Anyways.
think it would be really cool. And I agree with you. I think giving that perspective, just like we do for founders, where you want to show them that the process and the moment they're going through is part of a normal process of evolution. And it takes away that imposter syndrome. It makes them feel more comfortable in their own skin. It emboldens them to go and act on their really cool, inspired ideas
Mhm.
that they've been like quietly questioning, like, is this a good idea? Probably. Let's
Yeah.
test it.
Well, I'd be interested too from the people that you're interviewing. Like one of the things that I've struggled with the most being a founder, starting a nonprofit, which is what a lot of ESOs are for
Hmm.
funding reasons, like has been a much harder transition than I would have ever imagined because of the way the stakeholders are, the way the funding is, all these different, I mean, to the point where it's like probably half the time I worked as I was trying to force the startup mindset into a nonprofit, and not that I don't think nonprofits are high functioning organizations, right? They should be
They just
treated more
function
like,
differently.
but the community looks at them differently. They
Hmm.
shouldn't, but they do, right? And all the things we know about that. That'd be interesting over all the people you interview. Like, if you have founders that turn to ESO builders, like what were some of their struggles like with the transition?
We even have someone on our team currently that founder and is now working with us because they were like, "Oh, I'm really into what you're doing and I'm transitioning out. I want to do this." And I would say probably on a weekly basis, it's getting a little further apart now. We have to
Yeah.
have a grounding conversation around perspective because it's really hard to make that flip into being the ESO versus being the founder. And what can you expect and how can you shift things? And we've had multiple conversations around this is so much harder than as a founder I thought this side of the table was.
Hmm.
Like, I didn't understand
Yes.
how hard it is actually to do this work, which to me, like, I was like, oh, I feel so validated right now.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, it is
You
really
know,
hard. Thank you.
going back to the same founder problems, right? It's lonely, it's hard, it's just different. Well, kudos. I mean, I think that would be an interesting, again, not that you need more topics to think about, but that would be interesting to me because locally, I'm probably one of the first entrepreneurs to then run an organization like this.
To flip to the
They
other
were,
side of that table. Yeah.
because a lot of times, like our previous organizations, I was a board member, right? But but the my predecessors were not founders or entrepreneurs. They
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
project program managers inside of larger organizations, right? Not, I mean, do great work. It just has, I have a different mindset. And so to your point about ground, that you really struck a chord with me. You're like these weekly grounding conversations. I had my own personal tribe of people like, am I, is there something wrong with me? Like, what's cool? And they're like, well, yes, there is something wrong with you, but not what you're doing. Know what you're doing.
It
So,
oftentimes feels like you're ramming your head against a wall because you're like, "Am I doing this correctly? Why does it feel like I'm in a room alone? Like, what's
right.
happening?"
Would say it was far easier to raise money for startups than it is to raise it for a nonprofit. And I think this is a lot of what our contemporaries are working on, right? Is how do we story tell to the funders, local, regional, nationally, about the work that we do. And what I hope to see is, and I think this is something they're working on, is to your part about being better together. We're talking about community, but I think some of the bigger federal grants that came out, I started reaching out to peers of mine in connecting states, like we should go in together on something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such a different, even for me, it was such a different, how to wrap my head around this. We're all funded by our states. We're supposed to be doing things right, blah, blah, blah. But how do we, we need almost we need the help, the helpers.
Well, and it's really something that we're seeing that's really interesting is for many, many years, a lot of what helping entrepreneurs looked like was running programs, checking boxes. Like, yes, we ran 45 entrepreneurs through our startup program. Well, does that mean you actually created any impact, or did you just sign them up and shove them through?
Hmm.
So I think one of the things that we're trying really hard to change a lot of the dialogue around is like, what does that impact mean? How are we actually proving that serving those 45 founders created some yield on the other side? Because I
Hmm.
think that's part of the hesitancy in general for people to fund this work is
That's
it's
right.
vague and nebulous.
Right.
And there's a high
Right.
propensity for things to fail. Like if we serve 45 founders, the majority of those are not going to come to fruition. It's just the nature of doing startup things. So, how do we tell the story so that we can share that there is bigger impact that's being had, even if it doesn't equal that business turning into a large, growing, thriving organization? Did that founder, by going through this journey and deciding to bail out from their solution, did they then go on and get a higher level role at a company
That's right.
because of what they learned? Because that actually happens frequently.
Or did the next company they start was successful based on things they realized or learned through that?
Because my first three were an epic failure. Like first three out the just bad.
Epic learning experiences, right? I mean, this is what they all are.
Yes.
No, I mean, spot on. I think that two things I remember, back, especially when not studios, what I'm trying to say, like boot camps and accelerators, like smaller accelerators in town. Everyone got really excited about them. Let's join. And then we did, after about 10 years of doing it, we had a good data set. And we're like, how many of them ever actually went on, either in the company they went through the program or after, to hit $1 million in revenue? And the number was disgustingly low.
It's
Now,
shockingly low. I get
it's
it.
hard to track what you said is like, did they go and get another job, or like, did they become an employee at a startup where they were, I mean,
Hmm.
that's hard to track
Hmm.
just because we don't have centralized CRMs for our community. But that was really interesting to me is like, how do we shape it? So at Amplify, we have a lot of, I mean, we're state funded, so we have a lot of butts and seats metrics, right? One of the metrics that we have that we focus on a lot is it's like called Startups Advanced. And we use Village Capital's viral
Yeah.
framework to
I
do
love that viral framework. It's so
yeah.
good.
So to me, I'm like, look, if we're not getting them to the next level or getting them to a point they should close, then it doesn't matter all these other things that we're doing. All this other stuff is window dressing if they're not actually progressing along the framework, right? If they're not going from a 3 to whatever. So you know this framework. And so that's the thing that we tout a lot is like through our EIR program, this is how many milestones got hit and how many companies change different levels based on those parts. Those are really tangible things that say the work that we're doing is making a difference versus we had 45 people in a program and they started their company maybe, and then now we don't know where they are.
And they just sort of wandered off and we lost track. Yeah.
I mean, you try, but getting founders to turn in data to ESOs, for anyone that's listening, all three of you that may watch this, getting founders to turn in data for us to report on is, I was trying to give away a car one time, I felt like, and like I could not get people to fill it out. I'm like, what is going on? So
We've given
that
out gift cards.
everything.
We've tried all sorts of bribery and
Mm-hmm.
like, how can
Nope.
we help you? We will, if you do this, we will write you a check. Nope.
Yeah.
They
Nope.
won't do it.
Or going back to I used Abaca, which is Viral's software system,
Hmm.
and just getting them to do it multiple times, we have to tie it to something. Whether it's a scholarship, whether it's something else, we have to tie it to something, or they won't do it.
Always. Always.
They're like, what can we do for you? You're a nonprofit. I was like, well, you can give me money. I can still take it. Or you can just fill out the daggone surveys.
Could you just fill out the survey I sent you? It'll take 3 minutes, I promise. It's going to
Right.
be really simple.
Pay it forward, man. We're trying to help more now. So yeah. Anyways, like
I
we
feel
said
you.
before, there's nothing that we can't talk about forever. And
For
so I
sure.
don't remember how we started this conversation, this part of the conversation. But yeah, I mean, I just think that this stuff's hard, and
This
we
stuff's
need
hard.
help. The helpers need help, and I think that there is a sense of like satisfaction to see so many people, including yourself, work on trying to understand this industry, this space that we're in, and how do we help people that are entering into it, whether it's for entrepreneurship or really just regular like community stuff. Like, how do we help onboard them and give them the tools that they need to, not can't say be successful, but avoid the big misses, right? Avoid the obstacles.
Well, and at least start to learn how to navigate. So I feel I agree with you. I had a very similar sense of there are many, many more people sort of in the game with us now than there were 5 years ago, even, that are really in it. They want to help build that community and that field of practice. And so I agree. It's super exciting. Well, I appreciate you making the time to sit down and talk to me. It's always a good conversation. We could obviously go on forever and ever.
Yep. It's like we have part 7. This is part 1. When we get to part 12, no. Well, no, I appreciate you. You've been one of my favorite people to meet through the randomness of this work. Uh, Kudos to you with everything you're doing and all the communities that you're helping everywhere. If you're watching this and you don't know Holly, you're watching because I'm so great, like check her out. Well,
Well,
check out
thank you,
EQALL.
Larry.
Thanks for tuning in to All Things Equal. If you're passionate about transforming business education through your ESO, please subscribe and share your thoughts. EQALL, the BSO for ESOs, exists to evolve how entrepreneurship support is designed and delivered, and we are here for you. We'd love to showcase your innovative curriculum and have you join the conversation. Please reach out and let's keep building better learning experiences for entrepreneurs that you serve.